Hello everyone. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is right now. That's how YouTube keeps sending you more chilling stories like this. And now, let the night begin with Story 1. The night clerk wasn't human. I still can't close my eyes without seeing him standing there in the hallway, his head tilted at that impossible angle, staring directly at the peephole like he'd been waiting for me to look. That wasn't the worst part, though. The worst part was realizing he'd been standing there for hours, perfectly still, barely breathing. And I absolutely knew that if I had opened that door, something terrible would have happened. Let me back up. I was 3 days into a cross-country drive, one of those trips where you're running from something but you're not quite ready to admit it yet. My marriage had fallen apart, my job was a memory, and I'd loaded everything I owned into a Ford Escape and pointed it west. By the third day, I was so exhausted I could barely see straight. The road had become a gray blur, and I'd started having those micro-sleeps where you blink and suddenly you've traveled a mile without remembering it. That's when I saw the motel. It was one of those old roadside places that look like they were built in the 60s and haven't been updated since. Single-story, L-shaped building with doors that opened directly to the parking lot. The sign said Desert Vista Motor Lodge, and half the letters were burned out. It was nearly midnight, and I didn't have the energy to be picky. The office was small and smelled like old coffee and cigarette smoke that had seeped into the walls over decades. There was a bell on the counter and I rang it. That's when he appeared. The night clerk came from the back room so quietly I didn't hear him approach. He was just suddenly there, standing behind the counter, looking at me with this fixed smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was maybe 40, maybe 60, one of those people whose age is impossible to pinpoint. Thin face, pale skin, dark eyes that seemed too large for his head. "Good evening," he said. His voice was perfectly pleasant, perfectly normal. "Checking in?" "Yeah, just for the night. Whatever you've got available." He moved with this strange precision as he pulled out a registration card and a pen. Every gesture was economical, controlled, like he'd performed these exact movements thousands of times and had refined them down to their purest form. He slid the card across the counter without looking at it, his eyes never leaving my face. "Room 7, he said. "Quiet room. You'll sleep well." I filled out the card. Probably should have used a fake name, but I was too tired to think that far ahead, and he handed me a physical key attached to a diamond-shaped plastic tag. Not a key card, an actual metal key. "Office closes at midnight, he said. "If you need anything after that, I'll be making rounds." Something about the way he said "making rounds" made my skin prickle, but I was too exhausted to analyze it. I thanked him, grabbed my overnight bag from the car, and found room 7. The room was exactly what you'd expect. Worn carpet, floral bedspread that had probably been there since 1985, a TV bolted to the dresser, a landscape painting that was definitely a print from a catalog. The air conditioner rattled but worked. The bathroom was clean enough. I was too tired to care about anything else. I texted my sister to let her know where I was staying. She'd made me promise to check in every night, then collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. I was asleep in minutes. I woke up at 3 a.m. for no reason I could identify. You know that feeling when something pulls you out of sleep and you don't know what it was? Like your subconscious heard something your conscious mind missed? I lay there in the dark, listening. The air conditioner hummed. A car passed on the highway in the distance, and then I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Steady, rhythmic footsteps, not rushed, not casual. Perfectly metronomic, like someone walking to a beat only they could hear. Step, 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 step. Each one exactly the same length, the same weight, the same duration. The footsteps approached my door and I held my breath. They stopped directly outside my room. I waited for a knock that didn't come. Instead, I heard a soft sound, Fabric rustling maybe, or a hand brushing against the door. Then the footsteps continued. Same rhythm, same pace, moving to the next room. Stop, pause, continue, stop, pause, continue. I realized he was stopping at every single door. I told myself it was just the night clerk doing his job, checking on things, making sure everything was secure. Hotels did that, right? Someone walked the grounds at night, it was normal. But something about it felt wrong. The perfect rhythm. The exact same pause at each door. The complete silence except for those footsteps. I got up and moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek out at the parking lot. My car was where I'd left it. The office light was still on. Everything looked normal. The footsteps had stopped somewhere near the end of the building. I waited, but they didn't resume. After 20 minutes, I convinced myself I was being paranoid and went back to bed. I woke up again at 4:30 a.m. to the sound of those footsteps. Same rhythm, same pattern, stopping at each door. This time I counted 15 seconds at each door, then movement to the next one. Perfectly consistent. When the footsteps stopped outside my room, I found myself staring at the door, at the peephole, wondering if he was looking through it somehow. But that wasn't possible. Peepholes only worked one way. I was being ridiculous. The footsteps moved on. I didn't sleep after that. I lay in bed watching the red numbers on the digital clock change, waiting for sunrise. At 6 a.m., I finally got up, showered, and packed my bag. I wanted to get on the road as early as possible, but I'll be honest, I was curious. Something about the night clerk had gotten under my skin. When I went to return the key, I was almost hoping he'd still be there. He was. Standing behind the counter in the exact same position as the night before, wearing the exact same clothes, or identical ones, I couldn't tell. Same fixed smile. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Fine," I lied. Though I heard someone walking around in the middle of the night. "Ah yes, security rounds. We take the safety of our guests very seriously." "You do that yourself? Walk to every room?" "Every room. Every night, at 3 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., like clockwork." He said it with a hint of pride, like it was an accomplishment. "That's very thorough." His smile widened slightly. "We like to make sure everyone is exactly where they're supposed to be." The way he said it made my stomach drop, but I kept my face neutral. I set the key on the counter and turned to leave. "Drive safely," he called after me. "The highway can be dangerous when you're tired. People fall asleep at the wheel, accidents happen. Sometimes it's better to pull over and rest, even if you don't plan to." I didn't respond. I walked out, got in my car, and drove away without looking back. I should have left it there. I should have forgotten about the Desert Vista Motor Lodge and the night clerk with his metronomic footsteps and his too wide smile. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. About the way he moved, the things he said, the feeling that something was profoundly wrong with that place. 2 weeks later, after I'd settled into a cheap apartment in Phoenix, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I searched online for the Desert Vista Motor Lodge. I found it easily enough. There were a few reviews on travel sites, most of them recent, and when I read them, my blood went cold. Multiple people mentioned the night clerk. They all described the same experience, waking up to footsteps at 3 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., the feeling of being watched, the clerk's unsettling precision. One review from 8 months ago said, "The night clerk stopped outside my door and stood there for at least 10 minutes. I looked through the peephole and he was just standing there, completely still, staring at my door. When I checked out in the morning, he asked if I'd stayed put all night. I will never go back." Another review from 6 months ago. "I made the mistake of opening my door when I heard the footsteps. The night clerk was standing there with his hand raised like he was about to knock, but he hadn't knocked. When I asked if he needed something, he just stared at me for a full minute before saying, I was checking to make sure you were still here." The way he said, "still here," made me feel sick. I grabbed my stuff and left at 4 a.m. But the review that made me nearly drop my phone was from just 3 weeks ago, written by someone named Marcus T. On my second night, I couldn't sleep because of the footsteps. When they stopped outside my door at 3 a.m., I decided to look through the peephole just to confirm it was the clerk. He was standing there, but his head was tilted to the side at an angle that looked wrong, like his neck was broken. And he was staring directly at the peephole like he knew I was looking. I watched him stand there for 20 minutes, completely motionless. I didn't open the door. I pushed the dresser in front of it and waited until sunrise. When I checked out, he smiled at me and said, "Most guests don't make it to morning once they look." I called the motel. I don't know what I was hoping to accomplish, but I had to know something, anything that would make sense of what I'd experienced. A woman answered, not the night clerk. She sounded elderly, tired. "Desert Vista Motor Lodge." "Hi, I stayed there a couple weeks ago and I wanted to ask about your night clerk." "We don't have a night clerk, honey. Haven't had one in 15 years, not since Derek died. Office closes at 10 p.m. If you stayed with us, you would have checked in during the day. But I checked in at midnight. A man was working the desk. He said he did security rounds." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, careful. "What did he look like?" I described him. The thin face, the two large eyes, the precise movements, the fixed smile. Another pause, longer this time. Then, "That sounds like Derek, but Derek's been dead since 2009. Hung himself in room 7. She let that sink in. "We've had people mention him before. Mostly people who stay in room 7. He does his rounds just like he did when he was alive. Most people just hear him. The ones who look through the peephole." She trailed off. "What happens to them?" "Most of them leave and never come back. A few have... Well, we've had some guests who checked in and never checked out, if you know what I mean. Found them in their rooms in the morning. Doors still locked from the inside. No signs of struggle. But they all had the same expression, like they'd seen something they couldn't process." "Why do you still rent room 7? "Because he won't let us close it. Every time we try to take it off the system, it just reappears. And people keep booking it. They find us when they're supposed to find us." I hung up without saying goodbye. I still think about that night, about the footsteps that stopped outside my door, about the moment when I almost looked through the peephole to see what was there, about how close I came to opening that door. Sometimes late at night in my apartment, I hear footsteps in the hallway, perfectly rhythmic, stopping at each door. And I know it's just neighbors, just someone coming home late, just the normal sounds of a building settling. But I never look through the peephole anymore, and I always push furniture in front of my door before I sleep, because I can't stop thinking about what Marcus T. wrote. "Most guests don't make it to morning once they look, and I can't help wondering what would have happened if I had opened that door." Story 2. Room 104 is always occupied. The motel only had 12 rooms arranged in a simple L shape around a small parking lot. When I checked in, the owner, a gruff man in his 60s named Walt, told me I could have any room except 104. "Long-term guest," he explained, not meeting my eyes. "Values privacy." I glanced at the building and saw that room 104 was at the far end, corner unit. "No problem," I said, and took the key to room 108. I was in town for a week-long training seminar, and the company had booked me into the cheapest place they could find. The Pineview Motor Inn wasn't much to look at, but it was clean enough and quiet. Most of the other rooms seemed empty. The first thing I noticed about room 104 was that it had no car parked outside. Every occupied room had a vehicle in front of it, mine, the one 2 doors down, another near the office. But 104's parking space was always empty. The second thing I noticed was that the curtains were always drawn. Thick, heavy curtains that didn't let even a sliver of light through. And no light ever came from inside the room, not during the day or night. It looked completely dark, completely still. On my second evening, I was sitting outside my room with a beer watching the sunset when I saw Walt walking toward room 104 with an armful of fresh towels and what looked like cleaning supplies. He unlocked the door with his master key and stepped inside, pulling the door shut behind him. I checked my watch. 6:47 p.m. He came out at 6:48. 60 seconds, maybe less. But here's what I can't explain. When he came out, he looked different. Not dramatically different, not in a way I could put my finger on. But there were lines around his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. A sag to his shoulders. He looked older, exhausted, like whatever he'd done in that room had aged him. He didn't look at me as he walked back to the office, even though I was sitting in plain view. He moved slowly, like every step took effort. I told myself I was imagining it. The light was fading, I was tired, my mind was playing tricks. But I couldn't shake the image of his face when he came out of that room. On the third day, I asked the woman who cleaned the other rooms, Maria according to her name tag, about room 104. "Oh, I don't do that room," she said quickly, shaking her head. "Only Walt goes in there. He's very particular about it." "What's the deal with the guest? I've never seen anyone come or go." She looked uncomfortable. "I don't ask questions about that room, neither should you." Then she moved to the next room and I could tell the conversation was over. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about room 104, about the way Walt had looked when he came out, about the perpetually drawn curtains and the parking space that was always empty. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went outside for some air. The parking lot was dead quiet. Not a sound except for the hum of the highway a mile away and the buzz of the motel's neon sign. I walked slowly along the building, stopping a few doors down from room 104. From where I stood, I could see the door clearly in the weak yellow light of the parking lot lamps. There was nothing unusual about it, just a standard door painted brown, with a brass 104 mounted on it. The curtains behind the window were completely closed, but as I watched, I noticed something. The darkness behind those curtains wasn't uniform. It seemed to move almost imperceptibly, like smoke or shadow or something that was aware of being watched. I stared at it for a full minute, trying to convince myself it was just my eyes adjusting, just patterns my brain was creating from nothing. Then I saw it clearly. A darker shape within the darkness pressed against the window from inside, as if something was standing there looking out at me through the heavy curtains. I went back to my room and locked the door. The next evening, I was walking back from dinner when I saw Walt approaching room 104 again. Same routine. Towels, key, door opening just wide enough for him to slip through. I pretended to fumble with my own key while watching from the corner of my eye. He was in there for exactly 62 seconds. I counted. When he came out, I was close enough to see his face clearly under the parking lot light. The change was undeniable this time. His skin looked grayer. The lines around his mouth were deeper. His hands shook slightly as he locked the door. He saw me watching and froze. "You doing okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "You look like you could use some rest." "Mind your business," he said, his voice rough. Then softer, almost pleading. "Please, just mind your business and stay away from that room." "What's in there?" "A guest." He said it firmly, but I saw fear in his eyes. "A guest who pays. A guest who needs maintenance. That's all." "What kind of maintenance?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I thought he might actually tell me. Then he shook his head and walked away. On my fifth night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of a door opening. I went to my window and peered through the gap in the curtains. In the dim light, I could see Walt walking toward room 104 again, this time empty-handed. He looked even older than before, Saddam, moving with the shuffling gait of someone decades beyond his actual age. He unlocked the door and went inside. I watched for 10 minutes, 15, 20. He didn't come out. I was about to go back to bed when the door finally opened and he emerged. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked ancient. His hair seemed grayer, thinner. He bent forward as he walked, one hand against the wall for support. It took him twice as long to make it back to the office. The next morning, I went to the office to check out a day early. I was done. I didn't care about the training seminar, didn't care about what my company would say. I needed to leave. Walt wasn't there. Instead, a young woman I'd never seen before was behind the counter. She looked up when I entered, and I saw Walt's eyes looking out from her face. His daughter, maybe. Or granddaughter. "Checking out early?" she asked. "Yeah." Something came up. She processed the checkout without comment, but as I was about to leave, she said quietly, "Did you see my grandfather going into room 104? I stopped, turned back. "Yeah." "Did he look old? Really old?" She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "It takes from him every time he goes in. It's been taking from him for years." "What is it?" "I don't know, no one does. My grandfather's father built this motel in 1962. Room 104 was the first room he finished, the first guest who checked in. Never left. But my great-grandfather kept collecting rent, kept bringing fresh towels, kept maintaining the room like someone was living there. When he died, my grandfather inherited the motel and the responsibility. Whatever's in that room needs to be fed. Attention, time, life, maybe. If we don't maintain it, if we don't acknowledge it, it gets angry. What happens if it gets angry? Other guests start disappearing, check in, never check out. Found dead in their rooms with no explanation. It happened 3 times before my grandfather understood the rules. As long as he takes care of room 104, as long as he feeds it, it leaves the other guests alone. Why don't you just burn it down? Close the motel? We tried. My grandfather tried to board up the room once, refused to go in. 2 days later, 3 guests died in their sleep in different rooms. No marks, no cause of death. He opened room 104 again and started the maintenance routine. The death stopped. I wanted to ask more, but I also wanted to be far away from that place. I settled for one last question. What happens when your grandfather can't do it anymore? She looked at me with those exhausted eyes and said, "Then it becomes my job. It'll take from me the same way it took from him, the same way it took from my great-grandfather. Until I'm used up, then my children, if I have any. That's the price. That's what room 104 costs." I left without another word. I drove 6 hours before I stopped, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the Pineview Motor Inn. I've never been back, but sometimes I think about Walt, walking into that dark room with his towels and his cleaning supplies, feeding whatever lives there with pieces of his own life. And I wonder, how many more times can he make that walk before there's nothing left of him to give? How much longer before room 104 needs a new caretaker? I hope I never find out. Story 3. Someone kept unlocking my door. The first time I heard my door handle turning, I thought I was dreaming. I was on the edge of sleep, that foggy place where reality and dreams blur together, when I heard it. The metallic click of someone trying the handle, turning it slowly, testing it. The deadbolt held. I'd locked it before bed, along with the chain lock and the security bar. But I could hear someone on the other side trying to get in. I held my breath, listening. The turning stopped. Footsteps retreated down the hallway, soft and deliberate. I got up, turned on every light in the room, and checked all 3 locks. All secure. I told myself it was a drunk guest trying the wrong room, or maybe someone from the front desk doing a security check. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I went to the front desk to mention it. The clerk, a young guy named Justin, looked concerned. That's weird. I mean, even if someone had a master key, they couldn't unlock your deadbolt from outside. That's the whole point of a deadbolt. I know. That's why it freaked me out. Someone was definitely trying the handle. He pulled up my reservation on his computer. You're in room 302, right? I'll make sure housekeeping knows not to disturb you, and I'll let the night staff know to keep an eye on your floor. But honestly, no one should have been trying your door. We don't do security checks or anything like that. Could you move me to a different room just to be safe? Yeah, absolutely. Let me see what we have. He clicked through screens. I can put you in 418, 4th floor, different wing. Is that okay? Perfect. I moved my stuff to the new room within an hour. Room 418 was almost identical to 302. Same bland corporate hotel furniture, same abstract art, same smell of industrial cleaning products. But it felt safer somehow. New space, new locks, new anonymity. That night I made sure everything was secure before bed. Deadbolt, chain lock, security bar. I even propped a chair under the door handle for extra measure. I was exhausted from the work conference I'd been attending, and I fell asleep quickly. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of someone trying my door handle. The same slow, deliberate turning, the same testing pressure. Someone was trying to get into my room again in a completely different part of the hotel, and I hadn't told anyone except the front desk clerk which room I'd moved to. My heart hammered as I lay there in the dark, listening. The chain rattled slightly. The security bar creaked. Whoever was out there was pushing against the door, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to test every barrier. Then it stopped. Footsteps retreated. I grabbed my phone and turned on the camera, pointing it at the door. I wasn't going to sleep anyway. I might as well have proof. I waited until 7 a.m. before going back to the front desk. Justin was still there, end of his shift, and he looked surprised to see me. Did something happen? It happened again, same thing. Someone tried my door at 3:17 this morning. His face went pale. That's impossible. You didn't tell anyone which room you moved to, right? Just you. And I didn't tell anyone. I logged it in the system, but that's internal. Housekeeping wouldn't even see it until the morning report. He pulled up something on his computer, frowning. No master key cards were used on the 4th floor last night. I can see every access point. Elevators, stairwells, room doors, nothing unusual. Someone was at my door, I heard them. He believed me. I could see it in his face, but he was as confused as I was. Let me move you again. Different floor, different wing. And I'll put a note in the system that you're not to be disturbed for any reason. I'll even flag it as a security concern. Room 215. 2nd floor, far end of the building near the stairwell. I moved my stuff for the 3rd time, feeling increasingly paranoid and ridiculous. What were the odds of someone trying my door 3 nights in a row, in 3 different rooms? I set up my phone camera again that night, propped on the dresser, pointed directly at the door. I was going to catch whoever was doing this, and then I was going to get them arrested. At 3:17 a.m., my phone woke me with a motion detection alert. I grabbed it and looked at the screen. The camera was recording. I could see the door clearly in the frame, illuminated by the red glow of the exit sign in the hallway. As I watched, the door handle turned. Slowly, deliberately, from the outside. But here's what made my blood turn to ice. There was no shadow under the door, no feet visible in the gap at the bottom, no sound of breathing or movement in the hallway. The handle just turned on its own, as if invisible hands were testing it. The deadbolt held. The chain stayed secure, but I watched in real time as the handle rotated all the way to the left, paused, then rotated all the way to the right. Testing, searching for weakness. Then it stopped. And in the mirror on the wall behind me, the mirror I'd forgotten was in frame. I saw something that made me stop breathing. There was a shadow in my room, standing between my bed and the bathroom door. Tall, thin, humanoid but wrong in proportions. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, watching me watch the door. I spun around, turning on the bedside lamp in the same motion. Nothing. The room was empty, just me and the furniture and the sound of my heart hammering in my ears. I looked back at my phone screen, at the recording still playing. The shadow was there in the mirror for another 5 seconds before it faded into nothing like smoke dispersing. I didn't sleep. I packed my bags, pushed the dresser in front of the door, turned on every light and waited until sunrise. At 6 a.m. I checked out. I didn't explain. I just said I had a family emergency and needed to leave immediately. Justin was gone. Day shift had taken over and the new clerk processed my early checkout without question. As I was signing the receipt, she said casually, "Oh, were you in room 215? Yeah, why? That room has had some issues lately. 3 different guests in the past 2 weeks have checked out early, all saying they heard noises or felt uncomfortable. Management is considering taking it out of rotation for a while." "What about rooms 302 and 418? Have those had problems?" She clicked through her computer. "Actually, yeah. 302 had 2 early checkouts last month. 418 had 1. Huh. Weird that you happened to get moved to all 3 problem rooms." "Weird," I echoed, my mouth dry. I drove home in a daze, arriving at my apartment around noon. The first thing I did was review the phone footage from the night before, watching it over and over. The handle turning with no one there, the shadow in the mirror, the 5 seconds where something stood in my room watching me while I watched the door. I zoomed in on the shadow. It was too dark to make out details, but the proportions were definitely wrong. The arms were too long, the head was too narrow, and there was something about the way it stood, too still, too rigid, like a mannequin or a person who'd forgotten how to mimic human posture. I posted about it on a forum for paranormal experiences, mostly just to process what had happened. Within an hour, someone replied, "Did you stay at the Riverside Gateway Hotel?" I had. How did they know? Because the same thing happened to me 3 months ago. Different rooms, same pattern, something following me from room to room. I caught it on camera too. Check the background of your footage. Look at the TV screen when it's off. I rewatched the footage, focusing on the TV. In the black screen, like a dark mirror, I could see the reflection of my room. And in that reflection, I could see what I'd missed before. The shadow wasn't standing still. It was leaning toward me, getting closer to the bed, inch by inch, frame by frame, moving so slowly I hadn't noticed it in real time. The video ended before it reached me. But if I'd stayed asleep another few minutes, I don't know what would have happened. And I don't want to know. Other people started replying to my forum post. 7 different people, all with similar experiences at the same hotel, being moved from room to room. Someone trying their door at 3:17 a.m., shadows and mirrors, the sense of being watched by something that shouldn't be there. One person wrote, "I talked to a former employee who said the hotel was built on the site of an old apartment complex where a man killed 3 people in their sleep, moving from apartment to apartment over the course of a week. He'd take the master key from the landlord's office and let himself in at night. They caught him in the 4th apartment, standing over a woman who'd woken up and started screaming. The hotel management knows about the history but won't acknowledge it publicly. They just quietly comp rooms and hope people don't talk about it. I'll never know if that's true, but I know what I saw. I know what my camera recorded. And I know that whatever was in those rooms with me, it was getting bolder. First just trying the door, then standing at the foot of my bed, moving closer. What would have happened on the fourth night? I still travel for work, but now I never stay in the same room twice if I can help it. I check every mirror before I sleep. I keep my phone recording all night. And I never ever ignore the sound of my door handle turning, even when I know it's locked. Because locks don't mean anything when what's trying to get in is already inside. Story 4. The couple in room 7. I could hear them arguing through the walls every single night at exactly 11:43 p.m. The same argument word for word, like they were reading from a script. The woman's voice would rise first. "You promised me we'd leave in the morning." Then the man, lower, angrier. "We can't leave until it's finished." Back and forth, the same lines, the same cadence, always ending with her crying and him slamming something, a drawer maybe, or a suitcase. The first night I felt bad for them. The second night I was annoyed. By the third night I was disturbed. Who has the exact same fight 3 nights in a row using the exact same words? I was staying at the Maple Street Motor Inn for a week while my apartment was being fumigated. The place was cheap and clean enough, and my room, number 8, was at the end of a row of 6 rooms. Room 7 was directly next to mine, connected by a thin wall that might as well have been paper. On the 4th morning, I'd had enough. I went to the front desk and asked the manager, a pleasant woman in her 50s named Diane, about the couple in room 7. "I don't mean to complain, but they're arguing every night and it's keeping me awake. Is there any way to move me to a different room or maybe talk to them about keeping it down?" Diane looked at me strangely. "Room 7? Honey, that room's been empty all week. We've only got 4 rooms occupied, yours, the one 2 doors down, and the 2 near the office." "That's not possible. I hear them every night. A man and a woman arguing, it's very clear." She pulled up something on her computer, frowning. "No reservation for room 7, it's marked as vacant. Maybe you're hearing sounds from outside or from room 6? Room 6 is between us. Wouldn't I hear that less clearly? I don't know what to tell you, but I can check room 7 if you want. Make sure there's nobody squatting or something." We walked over together. She unlocked room 7 and pushed the door open. The room was empty. Not just unoccupied, completely stripped. No furniture except a bare mattress on a metal frame. No dresser, no TV, no curtains. The wallpaper was peeling in long strips, exposing water-damaged drywall underneath. It smelled like mildew and abandonment. "We're renovating this room," Diane explained, looking embarrassed. "It's been out of service for a couple months. Water damage from a pipe leak. We're waiting on insurance before we can finish repairs." I stared at the room, but I've seen them. A man and woman in their 30s. They arrive every evening around dusk and leave early in the morning. I've seen them walking to this room. Diane's expression shifted from confusion to something else, something that looked like recognition and dread. What did they look like? The woman had dark hair, shoulder length. She wore a blue jacket most days. The man was taller, brown hair, usually in a black coat. They never talked to anyone, just went straight to their room. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Come back to the office. I need to show you something." In the office, she pulled out an old photo album from under the counter. She flipped through pages of guest photos. Apparently, the motel used to take pictures of visitors in the 70s and 80s, until she found what she was looking for. "Is this them?" I looked at the photo and felt my stomach drop. It was them. The same couple. The photo was dated June 1982. "James and Catherine Merrill," Diane said quietly. "They checked in for what they said was a weekend getaway, but they never checked out. On the 3rd morning, housekeeping found them both dead in room 7, murder-suicide. He killed her, then himself. The police said they'd been arguing about money, about leaving town. They found a note that said, "We can't leave until it's finished." I felt cold all over. I've been hearing them every night. Others have too, not everyone, but enough that we stopped renting rooms 6, 7, and 8 for a while. Eventually, we needed the space, so we started renting 6 and 8 again. Most people don't hear anything, but some do, and some people, they see them. Why didn't you tell me this when I checked in? Would you have stayed if I had? She had a point. Look, I'll move you to a different room if you want, but I'll be honest. They've never hurt anyone. They just replay what happened over and over. It's sad more than scary. I wanted to move. I should have moved. But there was something about the way she said sad that made me curious. Against my better judgment, I said, "I'll stay, but I want to try something." That night at 11:43 p.m., I was ready when I heard the woman's voice start. "You promised me we'd leave in the morning." I got up and knocked on the wall. The argument stopped instantly. Complete silence. I waited, but the voices didn't resume. I'd interrupted something that had been playing on loop for over 40 years. I don't know what made me do what I did next. Maybe curiosity, maybe stupidity, maybe something else. But I walked outside, stood in front of room 7 and knocked on the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps inside the room. Slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the floor toward the door. The door opened. The room beyond was no longer empty. I could see furniture, a dresser, a TV from the 80s, curtains that looked decades old, and I could see them. James and Catherine Merrill, looking exactly like they did in the photo, standing in the middle of the room staring at me. They looked confused, lost. Catherine's eyes were red from crying. James had a look of desperate exhaustion. "Can I help you?" James asked, his voice hoarse. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to ghosts who don't know they're dead? I heard you arguing. I wanted to make sure everything was okay. Catherine moved forward slightly. "We're trying to leave. We need to finish packing. But every time we try to go, we end up back here. We keep starting over." "How long have you been trying to leave?" 3 days. The way she said it broke my heart. To them, it had only been 3 days. They didn't know it had been 43 years. I looked past them into the room. On the bed, I could see suitcases half packed. On the dresser, a clock radio showing 11:47 p.m. Everything was frozen in 1982. "What are you trying to finish?" I asked. James moved to the bed and picked up something, a manila envelope. "These documents we needed to sign. We were running from some people we owed money to. We thought if we could just get to Catherine's sister in Oregon, we'd be safe, but we ran out of time." I understood then. They'd been killed before they could complete their escape. And now, they were trapped in those final 3 days, repeating the same arguments, the same preparations, the same doomed attempt to flee. "You don't need to finish," I said gently. "You're safe now. Whatever you were running from, it's over. You can leave." Catherine looked at me with hope and terror. "Are you sure? James says we can't leave until we sign the papers, until we settle everything, until..." "It's already settled. Everything's done. You can go now." They both stared at me. Then James looked down at the envelope in his hands and it dissolved into dust. The room around them began to fade, colors draining away, furniture becoming transparent. Catherine reached for James's hand. "Is it really over?" "I think so," he said. He looked at me one more time. "Thank you." They faded into nothing. The room beyond the door returned to its ruined state. Bare mattress, peeling wallpaper, emptiness. I stood there for a long time looking at that empty room, wondering if I'd really seen what I thought I'd seen. I didn't hear them argue again that night, or any night after. When I checked out 3 days later, Diane asked if I'd had any more problems with noise. I told her no, everything had been quiet. She looked relieved, but also a little sad. "That's good. That's really good." She hesitated, then added, "Room 7 was always the worst after what happened there. Some places hold on to trauma, but maybe it's finally letting go." I think about James and Catherine sometimes, about how they spent 43 years trapped in the worst 3 days of their lives, trying to finish something that could never be finished, trying to escape something they'd already escaped by dying. I hope they found peace. I hope wherever they went, they're together and safe and free from whatever they were running from. But sometimes late at night, I wonder if they didn't know they were dead. How many other people are trapped in their own worst moments, replaying them endlessly, waiting for someone to tell them it's over, it's done, they can finally leave. And I wonder, when my time comes, will I know? Or will I be stuck somewhere repeating the same day, the same hour, the same argument forever? Story 5. I found a recording device in the vent. The air conditioning in my room made this clicking sound that drove me absolutely insane. It wasn't the normal hum of a compressor or the rattle of old machinery. It was a distinct rhythmic click, 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 like someone tapping their fingernail against plastic. Every few seconds, all night long. By the second night, I couldn't take it anymore. I dragged the desk chair over to the wall, climbed up, and unscrewed the vent cover to see if something was caught in the fan. That's when I saw it. A small black device about the size of a deck of cards wedged into the corner of the vent. It had a lens, a tiny camera lens pointed directly at the bed. I'm not a paranoid person. I'm an accountant. I deal with numbers and spreadsheets and tax codes. But standing on that chair, looking at that camera, I felt something primal kick in, the kind of fear that makes your hands shake and your vision tunnel. I pulled out my phone and took pictures before I touched anything. Then I carefully worked the device free from where it had been mounted. It was heavier than I expected and warm, still recording. There was a memory card slot on the side and a small LED light that glowed red when I held it at the right angle. I climbed down, locked my door, and examined it more carefully. There was no brand name, no serial number, nothing that would identify where it came from or who had placed it there. But the build quality was good. This wasn't some cheap spy gadget from Amazon. This was professional equipment. The memory card was the kind used in security systems, high capacity. I tried to pop it out, but it was locked with a tiny keypad. Whoever had put this here didn't want the footage easily accessible. My mind raced. How long had it been there? How many people had slept in this room, showered, changed clothes, lived their private moments under surveillance? How many hours of footage were on that card? I needed to confront someone, but it was 11 p.m. and the motel office had closed at 10. I called the emergency number posted on the back of the door. It rang 8 times before someone picked up. Starlight Motel, night manager speaking. The voice was male, middle-aged, tired. "This is room 14. I found a camera in my air conditioning vent. Someone's been recording me." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. We don't put cameras in rooms. That would be illegal." I'm holding it in my hand right now. It's still warm from recording. I have pictures. More silence. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lower, more careful. "Did you remove the device from the vent?" "Yes." "Don't touch anything else. I'll be right there." He hung up before I could respond. I sat on the bed holding the camera, waiting. My skin crawled thinking about being watched, recorded, studied. I'd been in this room for 2 nights. What had I done? I'd changed clothes, obviously, slept, worked on my laptop, made phone calls to my wife and kids, private conversations, private moments. The knock on my door came exactly 6 minutes later. I checked through the peephole and saw a man in his 40s, slightly overweight, wearing a Starlight Motel polo shirt. He looked nervous. I opened the door but kept the chain on. "Are you the manager?" "Yes, Dave Pelletier. Can I come in and see what you found?" "How do I know you didn't put it there?" He looked genuinely taken aback. "I didn't, I swear. But I need to see it to figure out what's going on." I weighed my options and decided I wanted answers more than I wanted to play it safe. I let him in. He took the camera from me carefully, examining it with the kind of familiarity that made my stomach turn. He knew what he was looking at. He'd seen devices like this before. "Shit," he muttered. "Shit, shit, shit. You know what this is?" "Yeah, this is a ZN400 high-end surveillance camera, motion-activated, remote accessible. This is the kind of thing private investigators use, or people who shouldn't have access to this technology." "Who put it there?" "I don't know. But I need to check something." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's Dave. I need you to wake up and get down here. No, right now. Room 14. Just come." He hung up and looked at me. "The owner is coming. This is serious. If there are cameras in the rooms, we could be shut down. We could be sued into bankruptcy. We need to figure out who did this and when." "How long has this room been occupied?" "You checked in 2 days ago. Before that, it was vacant for about a week. Before that..." He pulled out his phone and checked something. "A couple stayed here for 3 nights. Before that, a single man for 1 night. Before that, a family with kids for 2 nights. I felt sick thinking about a family with children being recorded. "We need to call the police." "Yes, absolutely. But first I need to check if there are more." He looked at me. "Will you help? I don't want to do this alone." We started in my room, checking every vent, every smoke detector, every electrical outlet. We found 2 more cameras, one in the bathroom vent pointing at the shower and one hidden in the smoke detector housing with a view of the entire room. Dave's hands were shaking as he removed them. "This is professional. This is organized. Whoever did this had time and access." "Who has access to the rooms?" "Housekeeping, maintenance." "Me, the owner, that's it." We moved to the next room and the next, checking vents and fixtures. We found cameras in 7 of the 12 rooms, always the same model, always carefully positioned, always still recording. The owner arrived, a woman in her 60s named Patricia, who looked absolutely horrified when she saw what we'd found. I had no idea. I swear to God, I had no idea. "Who's your maintenance guy?" I asked. Dave and Patricia exchanged looks. "Tony Shepard. He's been with us for 3 years. Quiet guy, keeps to himself, does good work." "Where is he now?" "He lives in room 12, the room at the end." We walked over as a group. Dave knocked on the door. No answer. He used his master key. The room was neat, organized, and full of equipment. Monitors showing live feeds from the cameras we'd just found. A laptop with files labeled by date and room number. External hard drives stacked on the desk. And on the wall, printed photographs of guests. Hundreds of them. People sleeping, showering, changing, living their lives. I saw my own face in several photos. Me on my laptop. Me sleeping. Me on the phone with my wife. Patricia made a small, choked sound. Dave immediately called 911. We waited in the parking lot for the police to arrive. None of us wanted to stay in that room surrounded by evidence of years of surveillance. Patricia was crying. Dave kept apologizing even though it wasn't his fault. I asked the question I'd been afraid to ask. "How long do you think he's been doing this?" Dave looked at the evidence we'd collected, the cameras, the memory cards. Based on the amount of storage and the files I saw, years. At least 3 years. Maybe longer. The police arrived and spent 4 hours processing the scene. They found over 50 terabytes of footage stored on those hard drives, recordings of hundreds of guests, intimate moments, private moments, moments that should never have been seen by anyone. Tony Shepard was arrested at 4 a.m. at his girlfriend's house. He confessed to everything. He'd been selling footage to various websites, making thousands of dollars a month. He'd installed the cameras gradually over the course of 2 years, adding rooms one by one whenever he had access. Some of the footage had been viewed by tens of thousands of people online. The police detective told me they'd contact me about testifying, about identifying footage, about being part of what would likely be a massive federal case. They offered counseling services. They apologized as if it was somehow their fault. The Starlight Motel closed permanently 3 weeks later. The lawsuit from dozens of guests, including me, bankrupted Patricia. The motel was torn down 6 months after that. The lot is empty now, just cracked pavement and weeds. But here's what keeps me up at night. The detective told me they'd identified footage of over 300 different people across those 3 years. They'd only been able to contact about half of them. The rest were travelers passing through, paid in cash, used fake names, or couldn't be traced. Which means there are hundreds of people out there who have no idea they were recorded. People who stayed one night in a cheap motel and moved on with their lives, never knowing that their most private moments were captured, stored, and distributed online. I think about them sometimes. The businessman who paid cash and didn't leave a name. The couple celebrating an anniversary in secret. The family with young children who just needed a place to sleep. All of them violated without knowing it. And I think about every hotel room I've stayed in since. Every vent cover, every smoke detector, every electrical outlet. I check them all now. Every single time. I bring a flashlight and a screwdriver. I spend the first 30 minutes of every stay searching for cameras. My wife thinks I'm paranoid. My therapist says I'm experiencing hypervigilance from trauma. Maybe they're right. But I know what I found in room 14 of the Starlight Motel. I know what was done to me and hundreds of others. And I know that Tony Shepard probably isn't the only person who's figured out how easy it is to watch people who think they're alone. So I keep checking. I keep searching. Because I'll never again assume that a room is private just because I locked the door. I found 17 cameras total that night. 17 lenses pointed at beds and showers and private spaces. And somewhere out there on servers I'll never find, footage of me still exists. Being watched by people I'll never meet. Forever. That's what I can't forgive. Not the violation itself, but the fact that it's permanent. That somewhere in the dark corners of the internet I'm still being watched, still being studied, still being violated over and over by strangers I'll never see. I check every vent now. Every single one, and sometimes I swear I can still hear that clicking sound. The sound of a camera recording in the dark, capturing moments that were never meant to be seen. Story 6. The motel that doesn't exist anymore. I pulled into the Desert Rose Motel during one of the worst thunderstorms I'd ever driven through. Lightning was turning the sky purple. Rain was coming down so hard I could barely see the road, and I'd been driving for 9 hours straight. When I saw that pink neon sign glowing through the downpour, Desert Rose Motel vacancy, I nearly cried with relief. The motel looked like it had been frozen in 1987. Pink stucco walls, turquoise doors, a cactus garden out front that was mostly just dead stems and rocks. The office had wood paneling and a bell on the counter that dinged when I pushed it. An older woman appeared from the back room wearing a floral dress and too much perfume. "Rough night for driving," she said, smiling. "You look exhausted, honey." "I am." "Do you have a room available?" "Of course. Always have room for travelers in need." She pulled out a registration card. actual paper, not a computer, and slid it across the counter with a pen. Just one night? Just one. I'm heading to Phoenix tomorrow. Phoenix is a good long drive from here. You rest up. She handed me a physical key attached to a plastic cactus keychain. Room 8. Breakfast is 7 to 9 in the office. Coffee's always fresh. I drove my car around to room 8, grabbed my overnight bag, and practically fell through the door. The room was clean enough. Floral bedspread, landscape painting, tiny TV on a dresser, bathroom with salmon-colored tiles. Everything smelled faintly of mothballs and air freshener. I texted my sister to let her know where I was, plugged in my phone, and collapsed into bed. I slept like the dead. The next morning, the storm had passed and the sun was blazing. I packed up, planning to grab coffee before hitting the road. But when I went to the office, it was locked, lights off, no one around. There was a handwritten note taped to the door. Left fresh coffee and pastries in room 8 mini fridge. Safe travels. Betty. I went back to my room and found exactly what she'd promised. A thermos of hot coffee and a bag of muffins in a mini fridge I hadn't noticed the night before. Strange service model, but I wasn't complaining. I left cash on the dresser for the room, loaded my car, and drove away. Phoenix was 5 hours of desert highway and truck stops. I got to my sister's place that afternoon, dropped off my stuff, and settled in for a week-long visit. On my third day there, I decided to leave a review of the Desert Rose Motel. They'd been kind to me during a rough night, and I wanted to pay it forward. That's when things got weird. I couldn't find the motel on Google Maps. I searched Desert Rose Motel Highway 50 and got nothing. I tried Yelp, TripAdvisor, even Booking.com. Nothing. No listing, no website, no reviews from other travelers. I checked my credit card statement to get the exact business name. The charge was there. Desert Rose Motel, $67, $50. But when I Googled that exact name, I still found nothing. I called my sister into the room. Can you look at this? Am I losing my mind? She tried searching on her phone, same result. No motel by that name anywhere on Highway 50. She looked at me strangely. Are you sure that's where you stayed? I have the credit card charge right here. I slept there. I have the keychain. I dug through my bag and pulled out the plastic cactus keychain with the key still attached. Room 8. That's so weird. Maybe they're just not online. Some old places aren't. Maybe, but it bothered me. What kind of business doesn't have any internet presence in 2023? 2 days later, I decided to drive back and take a picture of the place just to prove to myself it was real. I retraced my route following Highway 50 east toward the New Mexico border. I remembered the location clearly, about 40 miles outside of a town called Socorro, right after a way station on the south side of the highway. I drove slowly, watching for that pink stucco building and the neon sign. I passed the way station. I kept going. 5 miles, 10 miles, nothing. I turned around and drove back even slower. Still nothing. I pulled over and checked my GPS history on my phone. It showed my route from the week before, showing exactly where I'd stopped for the night. I drove to those exact coordinates. There was nothing there, just an empty lot with cracked asphalt, overgrown weeds, and the concrete foundation of a building that was no longer standing. No pink stucco, no turquoise doors, no neon sign, just ruins. I got out of my car and walked around the lot. I could see where a building had once stood. The footprint was clear in the remaining pavement. I could even see where parking spaces had been painted, now faded to almost nothing. But whatever structure had been there was long gone. There was a historical marker at the edge of the property, the kind the state puts up for old buildings. I walked over to read it. Desert Rose Motel, 1962-1993. A popular roadside stop for travelers along Highway 50, the Desert Rose served thousands of guests over 3 decades. The motel was destroyed by fire on August 17, 1993. Owner Betty Morrison and 3 guests died in the blaze. The property was never rebuilt. I read it 3 times. Then I pulled out my phone and called the number from my credit card receipt. It rang. Someone answered. "Desert Rose Motel, this is Betty." The same voice from a week ago, warm, slightly raspy, grandmother-like. "Betty? I stayed there last week, room 8. "Oh yes, I remember you, honey. The thunderstorm night. Did you make it to Phoenix all right?" "I did, but I'm confused about something. I'm standing at the location where the motel should be, and there's nothing here. Just an empty lot and a historical marker that says the place burned down in 1993. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she laughed, but it sounded sad. "Oh, honey, I keep forgetting that some people can see that marker. Most folks just see the motel, but you're right. There was a fire. Terrible thing. I didn't make it out." My hand holding the phone started shaking. "What do you mean you didn't make it out?" "I mean I died, sweetheart, along with 3 guests who couldn't get out in time. The whole place went up in under an hour. Electrical fire, they said, faulty wiring. Then what did I stay in last week?" "The Desert Rose, same as always. We never closed, not really. People still need us sometimes. Travelers who are too tired, too desperate, too close to making a terrible mistake if they keep driving. The motel finds them when they need it, gives them a safe place to rest. Then they move on." I felt dizzy. "Are you saying I stayed in a ghost motel?" "I prefer to think of it as an echo, a memory of hospitality that never quite faded. You were safe, weren't you? You rested well? That's all that matters. But I paid with my credit card, I ate your food, I have a physical key in my hand right now. Belief is a funny thing. If you believe you stayed somewhere, if you remember it clearly, if you have evidence, well then it's real enough, isn't it? The key will work if you ever need us again. The charge will show on your statement. You experienced what you experienced. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Why can't other people find you online? Because we're not for other people. We're for the people who need us at exactly the right moment. You needed us that night. If you'd kept driving in that storm, you would have fallen asleep at the wheel about 30 miles further east. There's a sharp curve there and a cliff. They find cars down there every few years. I felt cold despite the desert heat. How do you know that? Because that's what I do now, honey. I watch the highway. I bring in the travelers who are too tired, too stubborn, too close to the edge. I give them a safe night's sleep. Then I send them on their way. It's the only thing I can still do, and I'm grateful for it. Are there others? Other places like yours? Oh yes. All up and down this highway, all across the country, little spots of kindness preserved in time, taking care of people who need taking care of. You've probably passed dozens of them without noticing. You only see them when you need them. Will I see you again? Only if you need to, sweetheart. And I hope you never do. I hope you drive safe, rest when you're tired, and make it to wherever you're going. But if you ever find yourself on Highway 50 in a storm, too exhausted to go on, too desperate for shelter, well, I'll be here. We'll always be here. Thank you, Betty. Thank you for staying with us, honey. Safe travels. She hung up. I stood in that empty lot for a long time, holding my phone, looking at the historical marker and the ruins of a foundation that shouldn't exist anymore. I got back in my car and pulled the plastic cactus keychain from my pocket. The key was real, solid, heavy in my hand. I could see where it had been used, where the metal had been worn smooth from being turned in a lock. I never told my sister the full story. I never told anyone, really, except for writing this now. Who would believe it? I barely believe it myself, but I still have that key. And sometimes late at night when I'm driving long distances, I wonder how many other travelers have been saved by places that shouldn't exist anymore. How many people have been kept safe by the ghosts of hospitality, by echoes of kindness that refuse to fade even after death. I hope Betty's still out there watching Highway 50, bringing in the desperate and the exhausted. I hope she saves 1,000 more travelers from making that final fatal mistake. And I hope I never need to find the Desert Rose Motel again, because if I do, it means I'm in real danger. It means I'm too tired, too stubborn, too close to the edge. But I keep the key, just in case. You never know when you might need a place that doesn't exist anymore, run by someone who died 30 years ago, offering the simplest gift imaginable: a safe place to rest for one more night. Story 7. The previous guest left a warning. The first thing I did when I got to my motel room was the same thing I always do. I checked under the bed, looked in the closet, tested the locks. Years of traveling alone for work had made me cautious. But I'd never thought to check the nightstand drawer until that night. I was staying at the roadside inn off Interstate 40, one of those places with 30 rooms and a parking lot that's never more than half full. My company had booked it because it was cheap and close to the client site. I'd be there for 3 nights, then home for the weekend. The room was standard: 2 double beds with matching floral bedspreads, a TV bolted to the dresser, a bathroom with tiles that had probably been white once. Everything smelled like industrial cleaning products trying to mask decades of cigarette smoke that had soaked into the walls before smoking indoors was banned. I unpacked my suitcase, hung up my work clothes, and sat on the bed to check my phone. That's when I noticed the Bible in the nightstand drawer was sitting at a weird angle, like someone had shoved it back in quickly. I don't know why I pulled it out. Curiosity, maybe, or boredom. But when I opened the drawer fully, I saw a folded piece of paper tucked inside the Bible's front cover. The handwriting was frantic, like someone had written it in a hurry. "Don't sleep with your back to the bathroom. Lock it if you can. He comes through the mirror after midnight." I stared at it for a full minute, trying to decide if this was a joke, some bored teenager trying to scare the next guest. A scene from a horror movie someone was recreating for fun. But the handwriting looked genuinely panicked. The pen had pressed hard enough to tear through the paper in some places, and there were smudges that might have been sweat or tears. I looked at the bathroom door. It was one of those hollow doors that didn't quite fit the frame, with a gap at the bottom and no lock. Just a basic handle that turned. The bathroom itself was tiny. Sink, toilet, shower with a vinyl curtain, and a mirror above the sink. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a note, probably a prank. I crumpled it up and threw it away, determined not to let someone's stupid joke get in my head. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. At 11 p.m., I turned off the lights and got into bed. I'd positioned myself in the bed further from the bathroom, though I told myself that was just coincidence, just comfort. I fell asleep watching TV. I woke up at 12:47 a.m., I know because I checked my phone, to a sound I couldn't immediately identify. A soft, wet sound, like footsteps on wet tile, coming from the bathroom. I lay perfectly still listening. The sound continued. Step. Pause, step, pause. Slow, deliberate, moving across the bathroom floor, then it stopped. I waited, barely breathing. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was pipes or the room above me or something from outside. Old motels made all kinds of sounds. Then I heard the bathroom door creak open. My entire body went rigid. I was facing away from the bathroom toward the window, and I absolutely did not want to turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to stay still, to pretend to be asleep, to not acknowledge whatever was happening behind me. The wet footsteps resumed, on the carpet now, closer. I could feel presence in the room, that primitive sense that tells you when you're being watched, when you're not alone, when something is focused entirely on you. The footsteps stopped right next to my bed. I could hear breathing, slow, rattling breaths that sounded like they were coming from damaged lungs or a throat that wasn't quite working properly. And I could smell something, chlorine maybe, or mildew, or something that had been wet for too long. I squeezed my eyes shut, pretending to sleep, praying that whatever was standing next to me would leave. The breathing continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then finally the footsteps retreated, back across the carpet, back into the bathroom, back across the tile. The door creaked shut. I stayed frozen for another 20 minutes before I dared to move. Then I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and looked at the bathroom door. It was closed. No water on the carpet, no footprints, nothing to indicate anyone had been there. I turned on every light in the room and checked the bathroom. Empty. The floor was dry. The mirror showed only my own terrified reflection. I pulled the wadded-up note from the trash and read it again. Don't sleep with your back to the bathroom. Lock it if you can. He comes through the mirror after midnight. I couldn't lock the door. There was no lock, but I could block it. I dragged the desk chair across the room and wedged it under the bathroom door handle. Then I pushed the heavy dresser toward the bathroom, creating a barrier between the door and the beds. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat on the bed with all the lights on, watching the bathroom door, listening for wet footsteps. The next morning, I went to the front desk to ask for a different room. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, barely looked up. "What's wrong with your current room?" I heard strange noises from the bathroom last night. It made me uncomfortable. I'd just like to move to a different room if possible." She typed something into her computer. "We're pretty full tonight. I can move you tomorrow if you want, but tonight you'll have to stay in the same room. Is there anything you can tell me about room 14? Has anyone else complained about noises?" She gave me a long look. "People hear things in old motels, pipes, air conditioning, traffic. It's normal." This wasn't pipes. Then what was it? I couldn't tell her. She'd think I was crazy. Never mind, I'll stay another night. That evening I prepared. I pushed the dresser against the bathroom door before it got dark. I kept every light in the room on. I set my phone alarm for midnight so I'd be awake. At 12:30 a.m., I heard it again. The wet footsteps in the bathroom moving slowly across the tile. Then pressure against the door, something pushing against it from inside, testing the barrier I'd created. The dresser held, but I could see the door flexing inward with each push. Whatever was on the other side was strong. After several minutes, the pushing stopped, but I could hear something else now, scratching. Long, slow scratches against the wood of the door like fingernails dragging downward. I sat on the far bed as far from the bathroom as possible, watching that door flex and hearing those scratches until the sun came up. In the morning light, I examined the bathroom door. There were scratches on the inside surface, visible through the gap at the bottom. Deep gouges in the wood that definitely hadn't been there the day before. I packed my bags and checked out 2 days early. I told my company I'd gotten food poisoning and needed to go home. They were annoyed about the wasted hotel booking, but I didn't care. Before I left, I went back to room 14 one last time. I opened the Bible in the nightstand and wrote my own note on a fresh piece of paper. The previous guest was right. Don't sleep with your back to the bathroom. Block the door if you can. Something comes through the mirror after midnight. I heard it, it's real. I tucked the note inside the Bible's front cover where the next guest would find it if they bothered to look. Then I got in my car and drove 6 hours home, and I've never gone back to that motel. But sometimes I think about the next person who stayed in room 14. Did they find my note? Did they believe it? Or did they ignore it and wake up at 12:47 a.m. to wet footsteps and rattling breaths and the feeling of something standing next to their bed? And I wonder, how many notes are hidden in that Bible now? How many people have experienced the same thing and tried to warn the next guest? I still travel for work. I still stay in cheap motels off the interstate. But I always check the nightstand drawer now. And if I find a warning note, I believe it. Because I know what it sounds like when something that shouldn't exist walks across a bathroom floor in the middle of the night. I know what it feels like to be watched by something that comes through mirrors. And I know that some warnings should never be ignored. Story 8. I was the only guest. I pulled into the Sunset View Motel at 2:17 a.m. so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. I'd been driving for 14 hours, pushing to make it to my brother's wedding in Colorado, and I'd run out of road. The GPS showed this motel as the only lodging for the next 80 miles, and when I saw the red vacancy sign glowing in the darkness, I nearly cried with relief. The parking lot was enormous, easily space for 40 or 50 cars, but completely empty. Not a single vehicle except my own. The building itself was U-shaped, 2 stories with exterior doors painted turquoise that had faded to gray in places. Most of the lights were off, but the office window glowed yellow and I could see someone moving inside. The clerk was a thin man in his 40s with a smile that seemed too eager, too fixed. He practically jumped up from his chair when I walked in. Welcome to Sunset View, checking in for the night? Yeah, just one night. Do you have availability? He laughed like I'd told a hilarious joke. Oh yes. Yes, we have plenty of availability. You can have your choice of rooms, any floor, any view. What would you prefer? Ground floor is fine, whatever's closest. Perfect, I'll put you in room 104. Nice and close to the office, easy access. He slid a registration card across the counter with a pen. Just need your information here. I filled it out, too tired to read the fine print. He took my credit card, processed it with an old-fashioned manual machine, the kind that makes a carbon copy, and handed me a physical key. Not a key card. A brass key with a plastic tag that said 104. Breakfast is 7 to 9 in the lobby, he said, still smiling that fixed smile. Coffee's always fresh. Sleep well? I drove around to room 104, which was 3 doors down from the office. The Do Not Disturb sign was already hanging on the handle, but I didn't think much of it. I unlocked the door and stepped into a perfectly standard motel room. 2 double beds, a TV, a desk, a bathroom. Everything clean but dated, like the furniture was from 1995 and had never been updated. I didn't even undress. I collapsed onto the nearest bed and was asleep in seconds. I woke up around 9 a.m. to bright sunlight coming through the thin curtains. I felt better, still tired but functional. I showered, changed, and headed to the lobby for that promised coffee. The office was locked. The lights were off. A handwritten sign on the door said, "Back at 11." I looked around the parking lot, still completely empty except for my car. No other guests, no staff vehicles, nothing. The whole place felt abandoned despite being clearly operational the night before. I went back to my room and tried to do some work on my laptop, waiting for 11 a.m. But I kept getting distracted by the silence. Motels are never silent. There's always noise, people in other rooms, doors slamming, housekeeping carts rattling by, traffic sounds, something. But the Sunset View was utterly quiet except for the hum of my air conditioning unit. At 11:15, I went back to the office, still locked. The sign hadn't moved, no one was around. I knocked on the door. No answer. I cupped my hands around my eyes and peered through the window. I could see the desk, the chair, the ancient computer. But no clerk. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. I walked around the building looking for anyone, housekeeping, maintenance, another guest. Nothing. Every room had its curtains drawn, every door was closed. The pool in the center courtyard was filled with dark, stagnant water that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in months. I returned to my room and decided to just check out and leave. I'd put the key in the office drop box and deal with any billing issues later. I packed my bag, loaded my car, and tried to start it. Nothing. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. I tried again. Same result. The battery was fine, the dashboard lit up, the radio worked, but the engine refused to start. "No," I said out loud. "No, no, no, not now." I popped the hood and looked at the engine, knowing full well I had no idea what I was looking at. Everything seemed fine. I wasn't a mechanic. I couldn't diagnose car problems by staring at metal and plastic. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around, relieved. Finally, another person. It was the clerk from the night before, still wearing that too eager smile. He appeared from around the corner of the building, walking toward me with a casual pace that seemed wrong given the circumstances. "Having car trouble?" he asked. "Yeah, it won't start. The engine turns over but won't catch. I don't know what's wrong. That happens sometimes, the altitude, the dry air. Cars don't like it out here." He said it like it was normal, like cars regularly stopped working for no reason. Most guests stay about a week before they stop trying to leave. I stared at him. "What? Before their cars start working again, I mean?" He was still smiling, but his eyes were flat, distant. "Usually takes about a week. Sometimes less, sometimes more. I need to leave today. I have somewhere to be." Of course. Tell you what, I'll call a tow truck for you, but it's Sunday and we're pretty remote. Might take a few hours for them to get here. Maybe tomorrow. You're welcome to stay another night, obviously. Same room, no extra charge. I can call my own tow truck. Sure, but they'll tell you the same thing. We're 80 miles from anywhere. Tow trucks don't like coming out here. He pulled out his phone. "See? No signal. Never get good signal at Sunset View. Something about the mountains. You can try calling from your room, though. Sometimes the landline works." I looked at my own phone. He was right. No signal. Not even one bar. "Where is everyone?" I asked, changing tactics. "I haven't seen any other guests. The office has been locked all morning." "Oh, most guests keep to themselves. They like their privacy. And I had some errands to run this morning. Sorry about that." His smile never wavered. "But I'm here now if you need anything." "Are there other people staying here?" "Of course. We've got several long-term guests. Very quiet people. You probably won't see them much." "Can I talk to them? Maybe someone has jumper cables or knows about cars." "I can ask around for you. Why don't you go relax in your room? I'll see what I can do about your car situation and I'll let you know." Everything about this conversation felt wrong, but I didn't know what else to do. I went back to room 104 and tried the landline phone. Dead. Not even a dial tone. I sat on the bed and tried to think. My phone had no signal, my car wouldn't start. The clerk was acting strange. There were supposedly other guests, but I'd never seen them. The whole place felt off. I decided to do a more thorough search of the motel. I walked the entire first floor, looking for signs of other occupants. Every room had its curtains drawn tight. I pressed my ear against several doors, listening for TV sounds or voices or anything. Nothing but silence. I climbed the exterior stairs to the second floor and repeated the process. More closed curtains, more silence. But at one room, number 214, I thought I saw movement behind the curtains. A shadow passing in front of the window. I knocked on the door. "Hello, is anyone there? I need help with my car." No answer, but I was certain I'd seen something move. I knocked again, louder. "Please, if someone's there, I just need to ask a question." The curtain twitched. just slightly, just enough to confirm someone was inside. But no one came to the door. I went back downstairs, increasingly freaked out. As I passed the pool, I noticed something I'd missed before. There were lounge chairs arranged around the water, and one of them had a towel draped over it. A hotel towel, white with green stripes. The towel was slightly damp, like someone had used it recently. But I'd been watching this pool area on and off all morning. I'd never seen anyone come or go. That evening, the clerk found me sitting outside my room. He was carrying a dinner plate covered with plastic wrap. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting it down on the table next to me. "We don't have a restaurant, but I made some extra food, roast chicken and vegetables, fresh." "Thank you," I said automatically, though I had no intention of eating it. "Did you find out anything about my car?" "Tow truck can't come until Tuesday. I'm real sorry about that. But like I said, no extra charge for the room. You can stay as long as you need." He gestured at the plate. "Eat up. You'll need your strength." He walked away before I could ask what he meant by that. I went inside and locked my door, pushing the desk chair under the handle for extra security. I wasn't eating that food. Something was profoundly wrong with this place, and I needed to figure out how to leave. At midnight, I heard the footsteps. Multiple sets of footsteps walking slowly around the building's exterior. I peered through a gap in the curtains and saw them. People walking in single file, circling the courtyard. 6 of them, maybe 7, all moving in perfect unison. Too far away and too dark to make out faces, but their movements were synchronized in a way that didn't look human. Like puppets on strings, they circled 3 times, then disappeared into various rooms. I watched to see which rooms, counting doors. 108, 203, 214, 117, 201, 5 rooms that had looked abandoned during the day. I sat on the bed with all the lights on, trying to process what I'd seen. The clerk's words echoed in my head. Most guests stay about a week before they stop trying to leave. What did that mean? Did they become like those people I'd just watched? Those synchronized walkers who moved like they'd forgotten how to be individuals? I tried my car again at 4 a.m., creeping out in the darkness while the motel slept. The engine turned over, sputtered, almost caught, then died. I tried 5 more times. Nothing. As I sat in my car, I noticed something on the dashboard I hadn't seen before. A small piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper, visible from inside. I got out and retrieved it. Written in shaky handwriting. "They take something from you each day. By day 7, there's nothing left. Leave any way you can. M." I looked around the parking lot, searching for whoever had left this note. Empty. Just my car and the dark bulk of the motel and the broken neon sign casting red light across everything. Day 2, I tried walking to the highway. I'd seen it in the distance when I drove in, maybe 3 or 4 miles away. I packed water and snacks and started walking at dawn, following the long driveway that connected the motel to the main road. I walked for 2 hours. The highway never got any closer. It stayed exactly the same distance away, shimmering in the morning heat like a mirage. When I looked back, the motel was still clearly visible, still the same distance behind me as when I started. The geometry didn't make sense. I'd been walking in a straight line for 2 hours. The distances should have changed, but both the motel and the highway remained exactly where they'd been, like I was on a treadmill going nowhere. I turned back. The walk to the motel took 15 minutes. Day 3, I tried breaking into another guest's room. If there were people here, I'd force them to talk to me, force them to explain what was happening. I chose room 108. I'd seen someone go in there during the midnight walk. I kicked the door near the handle. It gave easily, the cheap lock breaking on the second kick. The room beyond was dark, curtains drawn, but I could make out a figure sitting on the bed. "Hey," I said, "I need your help. Something's wrong with this place. We need to..." The figure didn't move. As my eyes adjusted, I realized why. It wasn't a person, it was a shadow that looked like a person. Human-shaped darkness that sat upright on the bed facing me, but with no substance, no features, no reality. Just a three-dimensional silhouette of what a person should look like. I backed out of the room slowly. The shadow didn't follow. It just sat there, watching me with eyes it didn't have. I checked the other rooms I'd seen people enter. Same thing. Shadows shaped like people, sitting or standing in dark rooms, completely still, completely silent. Day 4, I stopped leaving my room except to use the vending machines. My phone battery was dying. No way to charge it with no power outlets that worked. My car was still dead. The clerk brought meals twice a day, always with that same eager smile, always saying the same thing. Tow truck tomorrow. Just hang in there. Day 5, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My face looked thinner, more hollow. My eyes were distant. I felt less, like something essential was leaking out of me bit by bit. That's when I understood what the note meant. They take something from you each day. Day 6, I made a decision. I couldn't wait until day 7. Whatever happened on day 7, I knew I wouldn't survive it. Not as myself. I'd become one of those shadows walking in circles, trapped in this place forever. So I did the only thing I could think of. I set my room on fire. I used the curtains, the bedding, a lamp with a frayed cord. I started it carefully, gave it time to build, then ran outside screaming fire, fire at the top of my lungs. The clerk appeared within minutes, looking panicked for the first time since I'd met him. The shadows emerged from their rooms, drawn by the commotion. And in the chaos, while everyone was focused on the flames, I ran to my car and tried the ignition one more time. It started. The engine roared to life like it had never been broken. I didn't wait. I slammed it into drive and floored the gas pedal, spraying gravel as I fishtailed out of the parking lot and down the long driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see the clerk standing in the middle of the parking lot watching me go, still smiling. This time, when I drove toward the highway, the distance closed normally. 5 minutes and I was on the main road, merging with traffic, putting miles between me and the Sunset View Motel. I drove straight through to my brother's wedding, arriving just in time for the rehearsal dinner. I told people I'd had car trouble but kept the details vague. No one questioned it. But sometimes I think about that motel, about the shadows that looked like people, about the clerk's smile and his promise. Most guests stay about a week before they stop trying to leave. I think about whoever left me that warning note. Did they escape? Or did they burn up trying like I almost did? And I wonder, what would I have become on day 7? Would I have joined the midnight walk, circling the courtyard in perfect unison with the other shadows? Would I have forgotten my name, my life, my purpose, becoming just another empty thing wearing a human shape? I don't know, and I never want to find out. But I drive past that exit sometimes, the one that leads to the Sunset View Motel. And every time, I can see the red vacancy sign glowing in the distance. Always vacancy, always waiting for the next exhausted traveler who doesn't know any better. I hope they see the signs. I hope they keep driving. Because once you pull into that parking lot, once you see that eager smile, once you accept that key, the only way out is through fire. And not everyone makes it.